the July 15th meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee to the Board of Regents of the Connecticut State Colleges and University System. We're beginning at 1:04 p.m. And Kalina or Lois, can you confirm that we have a quorum?
I believe we do. Lois? Have you done?
You guys can come right next door with me.
We have a call-in user. Call-in user 2, could you just identify yourself? All right, well, we'll begin. Lois, are you be able to take the attendance?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that right now.
Okay, good. All right, so let's begin with the, let me just go to share screen and try to find what I want. Sorry for the delay here. I'm hoping this shows the agenda for the last meeting, along with some other stuff, perhaps. Let me just get rid of that. So we have here the minutes of the last meeting, which were distributed already. And so you have those as an email attachment. Are there any modifications to those minutes? And that's page 1. And here we have page 2. If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Do we need a seconder for
Is that a second, Andre?
Yes, we need a second.
okay, do I have a seconder for the motion?
I'll second Diane Robinson.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Okay, any discussion, further discussion? If not, those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Abstentions, any? Okay. Let's go then to the agenda for today's meeting. Let me see if I can find it. I hope you can see it. So we're going to have the Acme conversation with some invited guests from California. That was an added item. Then there's a report from me, report from the chair, report from the vice chair, planning for the fall FAC conference if we have any further details, planning for COVID-19. I did send out a resolution or a proposed resolution, and then other business and adjournment meeting date next August. Are there any modifications to the agenda? If not, I'll take it as approved. And I'm going to stop sharing screen now, and perhaps Kalina, you can do the introduction.
Sure. So you just give a little context here. We're lucky enough to be joined by colleagues from California, and they have been dealing with some developmental reforms that are, we've been told by Mike Stefanowicz, are the most similar to our intended reforms in the form of ACME, right? And we know that we've had our concerns about ACME for some time, especially because our supports, though it is being referred to as the co-requisite model, are the supports that are designed for to be provided to students who are placed immediately into college level math and English will be purely optional, right? And there are all sorts of issues with that. So that's going to be a a serious deviation from where we've been with the kinds of reforms that we have sort of cultivated over the past few years in response to PA 1240, which was the last developmental reform that had reduced to some extent the amount of developmental offerings that we could provide, but did provide space to opt into providing at least one standalone semester-long course that is purely developmental. So in conversation when, because the phase-in of ACME, one of the things that made us a little bit more comfortable about, so for us, alignment and completion of math and English for our California folks, this is the reform that will, throw at all students into college level math and English. We were thinking we had until maybe 2025. We've been told that it'll be fully implemented in 2023, which means that we're not going to have very much time to really get a sense of phasing it in and how it's affecting our students. And in expressing concerns, because, most recently CCRC has published, results from Tennessee that say that, let me see, there's no significant impacts of placement into co-requisite remediation on enrollment persistence, transfer to a four-year college, or degree completion. So when I questioned, the sort of efficacy of these reforms at the last ASA meeting, I was told that not to worry, our model is much closer to California's. So when we heard what's going on in California, we thought, oh, good, we'll have some chance to at least get a sense from folks who have had some years to phase it in, to collect data, to look at its effects on students. So yes, again, thank you all for being here. And I wonder if we could just go around really quickly and just introduce ourselves and just sort of like name, college, and maybe discipline or role in the college, if that's fine, because we do have a few visitors today. Okay, and I can just go in the order that's on my screen, if that works for you. Okay, Lois, do you want to start?
Lois Amy, Norwalk Community College, Director of Educational Technology, Adjunct Faculty in Business and English, and Chief Instigator at Norwalk.
Facts. David?
That's me. David Blitz. I'm at Central Connecticut State University, and I'm co-chair of the FAC for the universities. I'm in Department of Philosophy.
Andre?
Andre Blushinsky, Tunxus Community College. I teach economics, and I'm the resident troublemaker.
Diane?
Hello, I'm Diane Robinson. I am the Associate Director of the First Year Experience at Southern Connecticut State University. I am a adjunct instructor and a full-time administrative faculty, and our SWOF representative.
CJ?
CJ Fogel, math faculty at East Los Angeles College.
Carmen?
Hello, Carmen Yamayanis. I'm a biology faculty of 23 years or so at Capital Community College.
Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Wilder. I'm with Charter Oak State College. I represent the administrative faculty there, and I run all the prior learning assessment programs there that help make credit available for non-collegiate learning experiences.
Let's see. Hold on, everybody jumped around, so now I'm going down the participants list instead. Brendan?
Brandon Cunningham, Eastern Connecticut State, Professor of Economics.
Brian?
Hi, Brian Johnson. I'm a professor of English at Southern, and I coordinate the first year composition program.
Daniel?
Hi, Daniel Judge. I'm a math professor at East Los Angeles College. I currently serve as our district math council chair. I'm also a board of governor for the Faculty Association for California Community Colleges, and I'll be serving as in the State Academic Senate in a Data and Policy, I believe, committee.
David, is it Sensi?
Senenstein. David Senenstein. I'm the chair of the math department at East Los Angeles College, and I'm glad to meet a group of fellow troublemakers.
Hello. Viviana?
Viviana Castillon from the mathematics department at East Los Angeles College.
Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Long from Three Rivers. I'm also a CSET rep, and I served on PA 1240 for the entire duration, representing CSET. And I'm sorry I'm not on the camera at the moment, but my 6-year-old is having her 6th birthday party today. So I have 12 5- and 6-year-olds in my yard. So I'm doing my best and I'm listening, but as you can imagine, but she's now on her second hand. 6. All right.
That's real commitment, Jen. Thanks. Lindsay?
Lindsay Muldoon. I'm in the English department at Manchester Community College.
Mary Beth?
I'm Mary Beth Rachesky. I'm math faculty at Asnuntuck Community College.
Matthew?
Yeah, I'm Matthew Dunn. I teach history at Housatonic Community College, and I'm a member of our college senate and the chair of our Gen Ed subcommittee.
Michelle?
Hi, Michelle Breaker from Gateway Community College, and I'm department chair of our first year studies department, and I teach developmental math.
Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie Starling. I am from Southern Connecticut State University School Psychology faculty and incoming faculty senate president.
Stephen?
Oh, hi, Stephen Castillo. I'm instructor at Los Angeles Valley College in the Department of Mathematics.
And Trudy?
Hi, Trudy Milburn, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Southern.
Great. Did I miss anybody in my shifting boxes? Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andrew Smith. I'm a professor and chair of the English department at Southern Connecticut State University.
And
hi, this is
go ahead.
Hi, this is Patrice Ferguson. I'm a core faculty member at Charter Oak State College, and I teach psychology.
Great. Okay. And I'm Kalina Susanker, co-chair of FAC, and I teach philosophy at Gateway. So, all right. So now that we all kind of know each other, I will give it to you, Daniel. If you could just share some of the, data on what you've been experiencing in California.
Sure, absolutely. Glad to be here. Let me just give you a quick preference. In fall 2019, all campuses in the state of California were required to no longer assess students, but to use what was known as multiple measures. And that bill was known as AB 705. I will be presenting some information about that. But that was about essentially removing assessment and allowed students, for example, who may be based on courses they took in high school, based on their GPA, were allowed now to essentially step into a transfer level English and math course. And so that was starting in fall 2019. That's an important detail. The data that we have here that I'll present today is from fall 2019. And we're going to compare it to fall 2018 year-to-year data, the year in which we still had assessment. So I call that pre-AB 705 and AB 705. Now, the reason those 2 years are important is because we know in spring 2020, COVID hit and we went remote. And since then, we question the validity of our data for a lot of reasons because of COVID. Okay. So I'm going to give you a presentation that I gave back in May, and I've given this about 2 or 3 times. It's even recorded on YouTube, and I'll give you this presentation that has been used with various board of trustees and various colleges in California to actually opposed the bill of AB 1705. Now, AB 1705 is a follow-up to AB 705. AB 1705 now says, hey, we're going to essentially remove any pre-transfer English and math because what we've seen is great data due to AB 705. And that's the claim of the bill. And so I'm going to share with you all this presentation, and you could make a decision for yourself. So let me go to share here. This is the first time I'm using share in PowerPoint. And all right. Okay. Now, this is Reclaiming Student Success, AB 1705, in the context of minority students. So remember, they're framing this all in the context of equity. They're framing this in the sense that this is really an equity issue, and as a consequence, we need to just put everybody into transfer level English and math. Okay, let me see. Next slide should be, if I have this correct. Okay. Okay. So this is who I am. I'm Daniel Judge, teaching math at East Los Angeles College for 23 years and teaching at East for about 23 years, 23 years, but teaching for 27 years. Currently serve as the LACCD District Math Council Chair. LACCD is the largest community college district either in the state or the world that serves over 200,000 community college students at one point. Due to COVID, I believe that has declined. I'm the grandson of Arturo S. Almanza, a local Mexican-American civil rights leader in the LA area during the civil rights movement. I'm also a former student of Jaime Escalante. From 1988 to 1990 at East Los Angeles College, I was an evening student. So I started in remedial math and English at East Los Angeles College, and I had no real intent to go to college. But, you know, I'll spare you the long story. I started at ELAC, and I was at ELAC for 4 years before I transferred. I wouldn't be here today if AB 1705 was in place in 1986 when I started at East Los Angeles College. I would have opted not to attend college. I would have left to the Marine Corps, and my options would not be college at all, based on where my skill sets were. And I typically dedicate this to my students because what I share in the classroom is the statement. It's not where you start, it's where you end. That's the most important thing. Now, what I've done with these bills, I've included these bills, I've included this information in my statistics course. This is the kind of things that I kind of talk about and teach in a statistics course. The mortality table for the Titanic. And I think that's important because it gives you a perspective as to what we're really comparing these data and these numbers to. A lot of people think that everybody died on the Titanic, but that's not true. Okay, there was 1,517 deaths, 706 survivors. Now, what's important to know is I've created what's known as a unit ratio. The unit ratio essentially is the number of survivors for every survivor, how many people died. And what you see there is for every survivor, 2.149 or approximately 2.1 people died. That's an important number to remember. So if you remember every one survivor, there's about 2.1 non-survivors on the Titanic. And we don't consider the Titanic a successful cruise. Okay, so keep that in mind. So this is that mortality rate that we're talking about, 2.1 non-survivors to every one survivor. Now, this data is about what we can expect with AB 1705. And I got this data from the state chancellor's dashboard. In other words, this was data that was collected throughout the state from community colleges and is actually centered on the chancellor's dashboard. What I selected was at transfer for fall only. In other words, we're looking at that snapshot of students that were at transfer. Now, that's an important detail. The reason that's an important detail is because those are the best prepared students under the multiple measures of AB 705, meaning those are students that took courses in mathematics, English, although this is mainly a math data demonstration, and had a high GPA, And so they're eligible to enter a transfer level math course. And so I selected at transfer for that purpose. The data, however, does not include drops before census. That's an important detail. This does not include drops before census. This data represents the best prepared, and we're comparing fall 2018, the last term of pre-AB 705 with the first term of AB 705. Now, this is a particular college. This is LA Harbor College in math. Remember, I chair 9 community colleges with math curriculum, and what you can see in green above, that's the pre-AB 705. That's the old assessment system. And in orange is actually the AB 705 data. You see cohort size and Harbor in general in the upper right. If you can, let me go back. Okay, this is the cohort size, if you can see my cursor. And that's, again, the cohort being of, entering at transfer, 383. 17 African Americans, 236 that year. And then you see the success rates. You see a 65% success rate for African American students, 62% success rates. You see the number of 11 successes and 147 non-successes. And then you actually see for African American students, 6 successes, Hispanic 89. And then the unit ratio that we're talking about for every successful completion in fall 2018, pre-AB 705, we have 0.5 non-successes and 0.6 for Hispanic students, non-successes. So this is kind of an efficiency rate if you want to think of it that way. Now, enter AB 705. Okay. LA Harbor, I have the cohort size in general, but we focus on the students of color, African American and Hispanic. So once AB 705 kicked in and allowed people to enter into transfer level, the best prepared African American and the best prepared Hispanic students, you can see African American students jump from 17 to 77. And that's what they call access. So the difference down here in the lower left corner, the additional students, 60 additional African American students were given access. 260 additional Hispanic students were given access. Now, this is something that proponents of the bill say, hey, this is great. We're giving access. This is about equity. And then if you look over now here, you can ignore the success rates, but sort of. The success rates for African American went down from 65 to 32%. For Hispanic, 62 to 43%. And I keep, okay, there we go. And so what happens now is if you look at this thing called throughput, the orange. Throughput is what the proponents of AB 705 and AB 1705 say this is all about. That they got really 25 students got through for African American, 215 for Hispanic. Look at the difference from fall 2018 to fall 2019. What they're counting as a success, the additional successes, is that they got 14 additional African American students through, and they got 68 additional Hispanic students through. This is their throughput rate that they're claiming is the success of the bill, because they got more people through. And when you look at that, you say, oh yes, they gave more access, they got more people of color through. And what they're saying is this is a successful bill. Focus on that. We are a success. What they're not talking about with you, and they're not telling you, is the complement of throughput, the number of people that did not get through. And this is the additional number of people that did not get through. So yes, if you open the floodgates, you get more people through, but are you counting the people that did not get through? Are you focusing on that? What do you do about them? And they're not talking about that. I'm talking about that. So when you look at this additional unsuccessful completions, there was an additional 46 African American students that did not get through. And then there's an additional 192 Hispanic students that did not get through. The complement of throughput, the people that did not get through. Now, when you unitize those ratios, when you say, okay, let's look at this from a unit perspective. Well, for every additional African American student that got through, in the lower right corner here, you can see there was 3.3 3.286, 3.3 additional African American students that did not get through. And for Hispanic students, for every additional Hispanic student that got through, there was about 2.8 that did not get through. And so we're trying to see and say, hey, let's kind of look at and count the people that did not get through. What do you do about them, if anything? And the proponents of this bill say nothing. Actually, I could speak more about it because I've met with the author of the bill. So if you look at these unit ratios and you say, well, what about these numbers? What about the people that did not get through? And this is only one college. I think people have to answer for that, right? 3.3 African American students additional did not get through. Now, this is one college. Hispanics, 2.8 additional did not get through. And so I summarized all this in the following slide. And remember, this was the best prepared students under multiple measures, the best prepared, okay? And this is just a summary of what I just said. So summary again, 2.8 non-successes, 1 success. African-American summary, we went through, this is what I just mentioned to you. This is a slide that illustrates the non-successes for African-American students at Harbor. And then this is another thing that you want to take a look at. This is again from the state chancellor's dashboard. The proponents of this bill are saying this is about equity. But what you see from 2018 to 2019 is declining success rates. In other words, success rates took a dip, a big dip. But what they're not talking about as well is the increased equity gaps. So what you can see here is the gaps have gotten wider. Okay, they're not closing. They were closed before or closer, but now they're wider. And again, this is from the state chancellor's dashboard amongst the best prepared students of color. And in this graphic, it's not just students of color. Hispanics in red, whites in green, Asian is in blue, and African American is in black. So as you can see, these rates took a dip and the gaps have increased. And so that's what we've seen at this college, Harbor. I compared the same exact data and information to another college in my district called Mission College. Now I want you to focus down here at the bottom again, because again, this is the access argument. At Mission, there was 6 African-American students that were granted access. 176 Hispanic students were granted access. These were additional students. You actually had a decrease in success of a negative number for the African-American students. So, okay, that they went backwards in this setting. Hispanic students, you had an additional 11 successes. Now, what I have here is, since you have that -5, if you were to actually assume for the African-American students that 1 got through, the ratio would be 1 to 11. So for every additional African-American student that got through, you had 11 who did not, even if you made an assumption and gave them 6. I put not applicable. For the Hispanic students, for every additional Hispanic student that got through, 15 additional did not. Now this is additional. So go back and compare and think about this when it comes to the Titanic argument. Okay. For every 1 survivor, there was 2.1 non-survivors. We're now seeing amongst Hispanic students, for every person that got through additional, 15 additional did not get through. And so you can start to think about it. Maybe is this a good idea? The Titanic was not a successful cruise. I don't know why you would call this a successful initiative. Again, this is my summary. Summary of just what I went through. This is again the graphic of that, 15 to 1. For African-American students, it was problematic because they actually had a negative deficit there. They didn't keep up. Even though they got access, they didn't have additional successes. So it's kind of problematic. And then I made that assumption again. If you gave them 6, it's 11 to 1. And that's an assumption. Gives you an idea. Remember the success rate or the survival rate for the Titanic. And if you look at the graphic now of the declining success rates now, And you can also see there is an increase in equity gaps. Again, I can't see why you can say that this bill is successful in closing equity gaps because the data in LA doesn't suggest this. It suggests the opposite. City College. City College again. This is LA City College. Again, if you focus on the lower left, you get the access number, which was great. 32 additional African-American students were granted access. 555 additional Hispanic students are granted access. And amongst the African-American students, they got an additional 1 student that completed. And again, I have to go back and really mention that these courses that I'm referring to is statistics. Okay, it's the statistics courses. And let me get back to where we're at. It's the statistics course, okay? The transfer course they need for graduation in the SLAM programs to some degree, but some STEM students take statistics as well. Anyway, Hispanic students, 555 were granted access. We have an additional 105 that got through, but we also have an additional 450 that did not get through. So you look at the right and you say, what are the unit ratios? Well, for every additional African-American student that got through at City College, 31 additional African-American students did not get through. That's 31 additional African-American students. For Hispanic students, for every 1 additional Hispanic student that got through, about 4.3 did not get through. Okay, and that's from the data that's reported statewide to the chancellor's dashboard. Okay, so summarizing again the data, but the graphic, 4.3 non-successes to 1 success for Hispanic students. African-American students, 31 non-successes for every 1 success at LA City College. Again, the last graphic is a graphic of the declining success rates and the increased equity gaps due to this bill. So as you can see, that's highlighted. Hispanic students and African-American students have that at the lowest success rates, and those gaps have increased from the Asian students and white students. West LA, same data at West LA. So at West LA, 60 additional African-American students were granted access, 138 Hispanic students were granted access, in which 14 additional African-American students got through, 31 additional Hispanic students got through, but if you count the number that did not get through, 46 additional African-American students did not get through, and 107 additional Hispanic students did not get through. What are the unit ratios? For every 1 additional African-American student that did not get through, 3.3 African-American students did not. And for every additional Hispanic student that got through, 3.5 did not get through. Again, this is worse than the Titanic. I summarize all this again, everything that I just said. And then you have the graphic for West LA. This is the graphic for Hispanic students. African-American students, the summary is here as well. Here's the graphic. 3.3 non-successes for every 1 additional success. These are additional. This is at West LA. And what you can see here is you have, yes, declining success rates at that school. And you do have increased equity gaps as well. It may not be as dramatic to some degree, but it's still there. And that's the last graphic on that, right? So white students, again, are the highest there, followed by Asians, and then African-American and Hispanics. So these gaps have increased, these equity gaps. LA Valley College, same data. The access numbers down here, 23 additional African-American students were given access. And again, these are all the best prepared. Remember, multiple measures, the best prepared. 320 Hispanic students of the best prepared were granted access, in which 12 African-American students got through, 81 did not. In this graphic, if I can go back, they had 11 non-successes. And for Hispanic students, 239 non-successes. So the ratio here, again, is for every additional success for African Americans, There's 0.917 non-successes. Now that's a pretty good, or at least that's a lot better efficiency, right? But for the Hispanic students, for every additional Hispanic student that got through, about 3 did not. So if you approximate that to the tenths, it's really going to be 3.0. So it's for every additional Hispanic student that got through that was best prepared, 3 did not get through. Okay. And again, I have the summary of that information for Hispanic students. I have, again, the graphic for Hispanic students. And again, it is worse for Hispanic students than the Titanic mortality rate. If you look at LA Valley College, again, what you see is declining success rates with increased equity gaps. Okay, all those lines go down, which is declining, and they've gotten as a bigger gap. So this is, again, amongst the best prepared students of color based on multiple measures of AB 705. We got Southwest College. So if you kind of want to go through some of this stuff and you say, okay, Mr. Judge, I got an idea of what you're saying. You know, Southwest has 118 African-American students, 274 Hispanic students that had access. Granting that access amongst the best prepared, 41 got through, 81 also got through for Hispanic students. But if you count the numbers that did not, 77 African-American students did not get through, while 193 did not get through for Hispanic students. What's the unit ratio? Well, for every additional African-American that got through of the best prepared, 1.8, which is really about 1.9 to the tenths, did not get through, and about 2.4 Hispanic students did not get through. So for every additional success, you have the additional non-successes. This is what they don't want to talk about. Again, I summarize this data. Again, the graphic, 2.4 non-successes for 1 success for Hispanic students. African-American students at LA Southwest. The summary again of everything I just talked about with numbers. And here's the graphic. 1.9 non-successes to 1 success for African-American students. That's a little bit better than the Titanic survival rate for African-American students. And again, this is the best prepared. The last graphic you see here is the declining success rates. And to some degree, they close the equity gaps, but it's kind of an absurd thing. Hispanic students in 2018 looks like it fares better than the African American students at that year. Again, the following year with AB 705, amongst the best prepared, they took a decline in success rates, but the gaps look like they've closed, but it's not closed in a positive way. So as you can see, yeah, they're closer together now, but you know they've declined tremendously. LA Trade Tech. LA Trade Tech, again, the access. 15 additional African-American students were allowed to take a statistics course. This is amongst the best prepared. 47 additional Hispanic students were allowed, in which case they got an additional 1 success for African-American and 16 successes for Hispanic. But again, what they don't talk about is the number of non-successes. They don't tell you that 14 additional African-American students did not get through. They don't talk about the additional 31 Hispanic students that did not get through. They don't talk about the ratio of for every 1 additional success, excuse me, 14 additional non-successes for African-American students. For Hispanic students, for every additional success, about 1.9 additional Hispanic students were not successful. So the summary of LA Trade Tech is what you see here, the data that I just said, and the graphic, 1.9 to 1 for LA Trade Tech for Hispanic students, 14 to 1 at LA Trade Tech for African American students. That's 14 to 1. You can see here again declining success rates. It looks slight for the Hispanic group. It's more dramatic for the African American group, and equity gaps did increase, okay, between the 2 groups. You may not see Asian and African American students there, and for some reason either that pool was too small, or they didn't have those kind of students at LA Trade Tech. My college, East Los Angeles College. Okay. Again, this is amongst the best prepared due to AB 705 and multiple measures. For African American students, notice in 2018, 2019, there was 16 to 16. So what that means is there was no additional African American students that got that were given access. But there were 539 additional Hispanic students that were given access. And this is our statistics course, Math 227. Of the additional African American students that were given access, there was 4 students that got through. Of the additional 539 Hispanic students, 116 got through. And again, this is the numbers that the proponents of this bill say, hey, we have a great bill. We have a bill that's successful. We got more people through. You know, pat us on the back. We've done great work. Again, what are they not talking about? The number of people that did not get through. They're not talking about these numbers. Now, for African American students, it went from 13 to 9. So there's a deficit of 4. The unit ratio I said is not applicable. For Hispanic students, they went from 283 to 706, which really means 423 additional Hispanic students did not get through. When we unitize these numbers, for every additional Hispanic students among the best prepared that got through, 3.6 did not get through. And that's at my college. 3.6 did not get through. And that's amongst the best prepared Hispanic students. I summarized this data here that I just said, and you have the graphic. So for East LA, 3.6 non-successes, 1 success. You can see here for the Asian students, there was a slight decline in success rates. For actually Hispanic students, there was a decline. Looks like for the African American students, it looked like it worked out. But remember, if you go back to the data, it's a very small sample size, 16 and 16. So it looked like in this case, generally speaking, they've closed some gaps at East amongst African American students. And I think this is the last college. This is LA Pierce College. Now, to mention something about LA Pierce College is probably the most diverse college ethnically in our district, meaning it has a greater percentage of white students. It's more diverse. Like at East, it's mainly Hispanic student. LA Trade Tech, if you've seen some of the data and some of the numbers here, there's very small white and Asian students. It's mainly minority or students of color. But that's with the exception of Pierce. Pierce, and I don't have the demographics here for Pierce, but it's kind of in a wealthier neighborhood, we should say, in LA, and it's more diverse, and there are a greater number of white students. Anyway, here's the effect on the students of color. 53 were granted access. If I go back, additional African American students were granted access. 611 additional Hispanic students were granted access, and that was great. Of the African American students that were granted access, there was 13 successes compared to 40 non-successes. And for the Hispanic students, there was 184 successes compared to 427 non-successes. Now, the unit ratios are the following. For every additional African American student who was successful, 3.1 were non-successful. This is amongst the African American population at Pierce. For every additional Hispanic student that got through, 2.3 did not. Now remember, these were the best prepared students of color in the highest GPA bands, best prepared. Ratios that are still, if you look at the data and the graphic, ratios that are still worse than the Titanic amongst the most diverse college in our district. And this again is amongst Hispanic students though, 2.3 to 1. And again, for African Americans, 3 to 1. So this is known as the Titanic data or the Titanic comparison. And as you can see, the last graphic again shows declining success rates and increased equity gaps. So this didn't close the equity gaps under that first year of AB 705. The first year that we consider valid because of the fact that COVID hit in spring 2020 and threw a monkey wrench into the data. So what can we conclude about this bill, right? As a reminder, this presentation just assumed the best prepared students on multiple measures and does not include drops before census, because remember, students that walked in and might have decided, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea for me, and left before census, they were never counted in this data. We're not even including those drops before that census date. They're not counted. Learning loss will greatly compound these ratios and decrease student success and increase equity gaps. So due to COVID, as we start to come back, maybe, right? There's learning loss in our district, or at least in the local LAUSD, and it's significant. So to conclude that students are going to do better might be the wrong conclusion to make, and this is what we're saying here. AB 1705 is going to come in here and will eliminate pre-transfer math and English courses, and this is going to impact our ability to serve lifelong learners, veterans, disabled students, essentially students in general. So as we're facing this new bill that says, guess what? AB 705 was such a success, and we just talked about the success of AB 705, or the lack of it, because they only want to count throughput, and they don't want to count the people that did not get through. They're claiming this is a success, and they want to eliminate pre-transfer English and math, and it looks like they're going to be able to do so to some degree. And this is what I'm saying in this last bullet point, is that what does it mean for lifelong learners, veterans, disabled students, just really students in general, in all honesty? We predict it won't be good. And what we've advocated amongst faculty in our district, faculty in the state, our state academic senate passed a resolution that is to oppose unless amended to give students choice. So in our state, we are opposed unless amended. And less amended for what? To give students choice. Our union organizations, our faculty association oppose unless, again, amended. FAC opposing unless amended. So faculty throughout the state, generally speaking, formally, are opposed unless amended. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have other faculty that may be for this, because some are. But that's a whole other issue. But the formal organizations are opposed unless amended. And I left here a quote from my mentor, Jaime Escalante, the math teacher from Stand and Deliver. He's somebody who said to me once, because somebody asked, when I had him for 2 years. I had him for pre-calculus, calculus 1, calculus 2, and calculus 3. The only 2 years he taught at night at East Los Angeles College, because I was a night student. Someone asked, who was the best math student in the class? And he turned to me and said, Daniel Judge. And he said, you should major in math. You're good at it. And up until that point, I didn't even know what to major in. But because he told me to do it, I did. I just figured he knew better than I did of what I should do. And because of that, I'm here. So I'm going to include a quote from him. One of the greatest things in life is that no one has the authority to tell you what you want to be. You're the one who'll decide what you want to be. And I believe, and faculty believe, that removing student choice is counter to this quote. We're now even telling students, we're going to limit your options for you. Because as you can see, all that non-success has ramifications. And again, dedicated to my students, my mentor, and my grandfather. So this was a presentation I gave in May 13, 2022. What I'd like to also say now here, I guess I can stop this sharing somehow. Yeah, stop sharing. I addressed about a month ago, maybe, our California State Senate Higher Ed Committee. They gave me 2 minutes to convince them to vote against AB 1705. So our State Higher Ed Committee gave me 2 minutes. And if I can get some pictures here, I'm going to get a picture. And I'm going to share this picture for briefly here, okay? There's a reason I'm sharing this. So for my whole 2 minutes debating Irwin, because it was a testimony of her bill, got to speak for 2 minutes. I was only one of 2 faculty members in the state to do that. And I would like to share with you again another important slide. I think it's important. That higher ed committee that was there consists of about 7 or 8 senators. Okay, I'm sharing this with you because I think it's important. Share. There we go. In orange, you can see these are the seats for the Senate Higher Ed Committee in California. How many senators do you see there? There's only one. Some of them stepped out. The chair stepped out. To the right is Jackie Irwin. But what's the message that you might deduce from all of this? I'll let you be free to conclude what you like. I have my opinion. But for my 2 minutes during this day, June 22nd, one senator was there to hear what I had to say in 2 minutes. So I can speak more about this and maybe I'll comment a little more. What we're facing in California is nonprofits who are pushing AB 705. They push that bill and they're pushing AB 1705. They're nonprofits. It's not coming from the education. It's not coming from faculty at all. It's coming from the nonprofits because they're behind it. And that's the truth. I could list the nonprofits. I can share with you some of that. But this is currently transpiring in California. This bill is expected to pass AB 1705. And, we'll see what happens. But I have others here that can speak to some other issues if they so like. And I will stop the share screen, I think. I think I don't have share screen, right?
No, you don't.
Good. All righty. So anyway, there's my presentation to you all. And so I guess it's open to questions, or I guess if anybody else wants to speak, my fellow faculty members that I have here, David Senensive, Viviana Castellon, CJ, Sarah Mahanti, Steve Castillo. Is there anything that you all want to add about the experience in California from what you see? Because I know there's a lot I've left out, but I kind of want to leave it to some of you guys to maybe speak your perspective and to maybe share with the group here.
Can I just add to Daniel's powerful presentation that those unit ratios, what they don't reflect are there other socioeconomic categories that we may be systemically disadvantaged, building in disadvantage for. We don't see, as he repeatedly said over and over again, these are the best prepared students, right? Well, I can speak from personal experience as a member of a single family household in the Detroit public schools. I was disadvantaged, and we may be literally violating our mission by building in that disadvantage to those categories, right? And because those categories are disproportionately minority, we are also disadvantaging minorities, all right?
If I may add in a little. What also isn't reflected is the number of sections of math that we have lost due to having to cancel some of our pre-transfer level courses. So there's kind of two avenues that are working here. One, as Daniel is talking about success rates or throughput versus success rates. And we've seen success rates actually go down. But the other avenue that people don't speak about so much is that we've lost over 100 sections of mathematics per semester. That's 100 sections, which is an average of 34 per section, so 3,400 less math students per semester. That's a job killer. I mean, think about that, especially if you have adjunct faculty, faculty that are just teaching, one or two courses here and there. Those courses will no longer be available for them. The other thing that Daniel didn't bring up is, so there were two bills. There was the first one, AB 705, which went into effect in 2019. And then there's a new bill that's already passed through the Assembly, the California Assembly, and is now up through into the California Senate, which is AB 1705. And this bill goes even further. It starts attacking the STEM programs and the calculus programs. Specifically, it basically is saying that any student that is declared as a STEM major, regardless of what classes they've had in high school or college, should enroll directly into calculus, bypassing trigonometry, bypassing pre-calculus. They go even further, that they state that we would have to prove using data, not common sense, not core content or knowledge, but we'd have to use data to show that students would be harmed by going directly into calculus. I'm not sure how they expect us to get that data unless we create a cohort of students who haven't had the previous knowledge, but that would be, in my mind, educational malpractice. So the same folks that brought us the idea of pre-transfer to transfer, they're now carrying this further. So they're not stopping with at the transfer level courses. They're now actually moving on towards the STEM programs, and who knows where they'll go from there. That's why it's really important to kind of catch this early, nip it in the bud before the politicians basically rewrite the curriculum, which really should be the purview of faculty.
Thanks. I see Andre's hand up.
Yeah, in terms of further data or analysis, that would be interesting to have. The question is, what would have happened to the students had they just gone through a regular, prerequisite kind of system? Although I presume we have some kind of background data like that, and compare that to what happens to the students who fail afterwards. In other words, do they come back and try again, or are we basically, their education is dead to them from there on? Because I think this isn't, I mean, there's a dynamic aspect to this, which, be nice to see.
If I may, that's actually an excellent question. And also in the state of California, in the community college, we have what's called the 3 strikes rule. That a student can only take a course at a college 3 times. And that includes if they take it and drop out, that's considered a try. So there was once, and what's also stated in this bill is that students are required to finish through a transfer level course within their first year of study. Now, we do have the fall and spring semesters, plus we do have summer session and a winter intersession. And there have been suggestions by those that say, well, if they take the course and they don't pass, they'll just take it again. They'll get their 3-4 chances, well, 3 chances, 4 if they can petition. And they seem to think that that's just fine. Now, those of us who are in education aren't thrilled with that idea, because what we have actually seen is after the second try, the students just drop out, they disappear.
So just piggybacking on what David said, and I kind of like want to chime in before, is that Daniel, you did a great job with presenting us the information. And I think that you highlighted a lot of stuff. And I think the other part that's not there is, as instructors, we see the students who are frustrated. We see the students who are just going to give up. They're going to give up because their ideal is, I've already taken it 3 times, I cannot pass it. I'm going to give up because I belong in I've been told I belong in a pre-calculus course, but I don't even remember Algebra 1. Our students are not coming out of directly from high school to the college. We have students who, what I say, they finished high school and something happened, which I call life, and then they decided to come back. Those are the students who are not going to be prepared for the class. And even if they do come from the high school, you're having students coming into these courses that they are lacking in Algebra 1 course. And we don't have the number of students who attend the first week or first 2 weeks of school and realize this is not for me, and they're frustrated. You know, we don't, that's, the data doesn't show how students are coming to us frustrated, and we can't just assume, oh, by the fourth attempt, you know, you just petition it, by the fourth attempt you should get it. How can they take a course that they're not prepared? So sometimes I tell students, think of a language that's very difficult for you. You know, if we're going to say, you know, Japanese, and Japanese is very difficult for you, I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm just going to put you in year 3 of Japanese, and I'm supposed to assume that you know how to do Japanese 1, 2, and 3. It's very difficult for students to, you know, the data is not showing the frustration the students are encountering. And this is something that as us as an instructors, we're seeing this, we're dealing with the fact that students just want to give up.
Daniel?
Yes. Thank you, Viviana, and thank you, David, for adding to what's gone on. You know, there's a question in the chat about, can you mention what nonprofits? I certainly can. I try to put some files in the chat, but it doesn't seem like it allows me to do so. But what I'll do is I'll share with you. These are what we're seeing in California as what's known as nonprofit groups. Public Advocates, College Campaign for College Opportunity, the California Acceleration Project, California Completes, Ed Trust West. These are all nonprofits. Now, let me also share with you another picture, because you say, well, who's funding the nonprofits? Okay. Let me share with you who's funding nonprofits now. And I'm not going to suggest that, you know, everything that these nonprofits do are bad. You have the Gates Foundation. I don't think everything that the Gates Foundation does is bad personally, but they do represent technology. Lumina is about student loans. ECMC, Student Loan Debt Collection. Walton Family Foundation, Walmart. Eli Broyd Foundation, Real Estate. James Irvine Foundation, Land and Real Estate. Okay, so these are the corporate funders with our very famous nonprofits like CAP, California Acceleration Project, and the Campaign for College Opportunity. Recently, our state chancellor, and let me kind of back up and give you guys more information. The data I presented to you guys is data that colleges in California submitted to the state. FAC, I guess I can mention this even though we're being recorded, right? Wanted access to that data, and our state chancellor's office refused to give access. So a formal process of public information had to have been used to get access to that data. I now have that data. They sent it to me to take a look at. I'm going to send it out to various people in California to take a look at this, because there's some interesting things to look at, you know, technical things associated with this bill and what's going on that we want to take a closer look. But, you know, to mention to you that it's been a process of how to get the data, really. But also our state chancellor currently resigned and was hired by, you know, a CEO from one of these, you know, nonprofits. Not the ones I have up here. These are the corporate funders of the nonprofits, but there's a whole slew of nonprofits in California that exist that kind of, they have corporate funders, you know. So I just want to answer that question in the chat because I had difficulty trying to put that in, you know. And actually, you know, Andre, to answer your question about, you know, comparing data versus past data, this is kind of what has gotten back to me, not personally, but through others, is that essentially these nonprofits, what they're saying is, hey, you guys had an opportunity to fix this mess in California of students not succeeding, and you didn't. So therefore, now we're going to do it. So, you know, and they made these claims about some of the claims that I've heard from some of these nonprofits are that something like it took an average of students 6 years to get through. Now, I'm not sure if that's true. In my 27 years, yes, I have seen students take about 6 years to get through personally, but I wouldn't say that was the average. You know, I've seen it, but those are like the exceptions. Now, it took me 4 years as a community college student. 2/3 of our students, it was reported at a meeting on Wednesday, are part-time students. So if you're a part-time student, if a majority of your students are part-time, they're not going to get through in 2 years. You know, and I was a part-time student. It took me 4 years. So, I mean, I can't say that the average was 6 at all. I can't verify that. Do I have data to suggest that? No. Just it's anecdotal, just kind of looking around and go, okay, you've been here for a while, but yeah, this is the situation they're in. But to answer your question directly, and that's kind of the information I have about it. That's what they've told us. Anyway.
If I may, the other question that's kind of relevant here is the demographics in particular. What is the time? What's the word? Time that students are spending at work and family obligations. I mean, the idea of this prerequisite. I mean, the core requisite thing is that the student is able to go, you know, so many hours a day or a week, and you know, but a lot of them are simply not able to do that. So they're going to be basically excluded from the opportunity entirely. I mean, I mean, where does that get measured? And then couple of snide comments. One is Bill Gates, I'm sure, is the expert on education because he dropped out of college. That makes him an expert. And the other thing is, as for language, it's a great analogy to math. I mean, if you're looking for a difficult language, Japanese is not the most difficult. Polish is. A lot more complex grammar.
Lois?
I just want to make a comment and question about what difference does it make if it takes students 3 years, 4 years, or 6 years, or whatever to get through. I'm always pulling students back and saying, hey, you're taking too many credits, you're taking too many, you've got too many obligations. And I always tell them this is not a race. You need to be successful. And I don't care if it takes you 4 years or 5 years or 6 years to be successful. And so that's where I am. I've worked with a number of students who took 4 or 5 years to complete, and they were successful when they completed, and they transferred to 4-year schools, or they got jobs, or they did whatever. So I'm not sure that argument about, well, it's taking your students too long to complete makes any sense whatsoever.
I just would like to add on top of that, and the problem is that a lot of the students are part-timers, and by the time they are done with their, let's just say their AA, it's already taken them like maybe 8-10 years. So they don't go beyond their AA. To them, it's kind of like, I've been spending all my life. I've pushed my family members away. I've pushed my children or husbands, spouses, whatever the case is. So they are spending 8-10 years just to get an AA. They do not further their education to a bachelor's. So it's not something between a 4 to 6 year. It's not a 2-year difference. You're talking about at least, and I don't have the data, but you are talking about students who are on campus or still taking classes for 8 to 10 years just to get an AA.
Kalina, and then we probably at around 2:15 should go on to our next agenda item.
Yeah, so just a comment and a question. I did appreciate when I listened to your May conversation in California. There's this sort of emphasis on the transformation of the mission of the community college, right? And I think it was David who mentioned it again today, that, you know, we are supposed to be an entry point for certain students in certain demographic you know, categories. And I always ask my students to introduce themselves and tell me about what's going on in their lives. And they usually have, they might have a spouse or be taking care of siblings. They have jobs. They have, you know, they may have commute challenges. Like, they have any number of things that suck the time out of their day, just in terms of getting around, plus responsibilities and priorities. And the idea that students just have to rise to this challenge because we have arbitrarily decided that that is the measure of success, is itself a sort of bias. And it's a bit cruel when you consider what a person's day would be like, right? So I've been saying this a million times, but the way that it is very much an abandonment of the mission of the community college, to not maintain that entry point for folks who weren't able to get there in a more traditional way. The question I have is just about whether so under 1705, there will be no more standalone developmental courses. Is there any sense of either what kinds of supports are going to be available for students and what kind of control faculty will have over the parameters of what those supports will be? Yeah, Danielle.
Okay. There's kind of definitely some details that that we can talk about left out. The thing that they say is if you take these courses, if you learn this material concurrently, they say just add these hours, to a course and have them learn the material at the same time. It's concurrent. They've been pushing this. Now, we at our campus, we have what's called support courses where we've done essentially the same thing. Now, the difference between what we do and what they're suggesting is that it's optional for a student to get the concurrent part. With our S courses, it's not optional. We also have the ability to schedule that better because of that. The concurrent component is not scheduled at another time. Now, what we have seen, because we have developed what's called non-credit modules, which is another thing where you say, okay, we have these non-credit topics that we teach that students need to be successful. The problem with that is that it's not mandatory. It's not mandated that they show up for that. It's recommended and suggested. What we've seen is that they don't show. So unless it's something that's a part of the course that they're mandated to do, if you leave it as an option, they don't show up for that. Mission College had concurrent courses that, that is prescribed by these people. And they too noticed no one showed. So they moved away from that model. They moved to the East model, which is the supplement courses, the S courses, because it had that mandatory showing up for the supplement. Okay. We also have embedded tutors. That has been helpful to some degree, the embedded tutors, but there's no extra funding for embedded tutors. In fact, part of what I had to advocate with the state was for ongoing funding for embedded tutors, because it looks like this is going to pass through. So we need this assistant with embedded tutors and to augment our tutoring programs. They haven't given us any extra funding for that other than this one-time funding that looks like might go through. So they're essentially saying you're going to have to absorb this yourself, but we'll give you one-time starting funding to help. So that's kind of an issue I had to personally argue for with the state. As you see, the one senator listening. So those things are there. David, have I left anything out?
Oh, I think you've hit most of the main points.
Yeah.
I just want to comment, Andre, you mentioned about, the extra hours. Yes, it does put those extra hours on the students and it is tough for them. So you are very correct there. And Kalina, or I think it was Lois who mentioned about why are they interested in how many years? Well, most of our students in the state of California are pretty much on financial aid directly from the state. So most of them can actually get their first couple of years of education for free. So I think that's driving a lot of this is some budgetary matters. Daniel did point out who is funding this. There is going to be a push for privatization of education. And when you also see some of those foundations pushing this that are into student loans and student debt collection, it just, for me, raises a red flag of, what the end goal is. But yes, I mean, I agree with you, Lois. I have told many of my students that it's better to get the base of the knowledge first. And if you have to repeat a course to have that base, then it better prepares you as you move on. I think that's fairly evident to most of us. But unfortunately, that's not how people in our state are thinking at this point. They're more interested in just getting people through as quick as possible, because I believe they think it just is, from a budgetary matter, more effective. And they don't see the long-term effects for those who are dropping out of the system. And of course, what the cost will be to cover those.
Well, so thank you for that. And I mean, in terms of not seeing the effects for those who drop out, right? It's, if you're just looking at the data, right, you don't see the students you lose. We don't see the students we exclude don't count. So to some extent, you know, we're never quite going to get sufficient data. But, you know, thank you for describing, you know, I was trying to figure out the sense in which we are most similar to California. And I think the sense is that we are doing that, you know, optional support model also, and that will be fully implemented in fall of 2023. There are certainly some differences in implementation. I know that AB 705 came with at least some funding, and like you said, there will be more funding. 1705, just to at least get the first push. We really haven't secured any funding to get this done. It's dedicated funding. And in addition, I know that part of you've had some time to collect data, and part of the ask in 1705 is to get more funding specifically for data collection. Now, that doesn't count if they're not collecting data well or not sharing it freely, but that's something, and that's not even something that we have in place yet. So that at least gives us, you know, this has been for me very instructive in terms of like what kind of data we want to request that is actually collected, etc. So thank you so much all for the discussion. And there's so much more to be said about the equity issue. Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you again. Yes, we scheduled some time and we took more, but it's important. And I think we can see a lot of the similarities between the situation here. And one thing that I've noticed is, you know, the sort of spreadsheet reasoning that goes into many of these decisions, which doesn't take into account the actual experience both of the students and the faculty. The statistical study that you have is really quite fascinating, however.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So let's go on, and if you wish to stay in on...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, no, it's not the spreadsheet analysis that's at fault. It's what spreadsheet, how do you put together this spreadsheet? What you put into it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Right. I just want to mention one more thing as we're talking about this, because I mentioned Tennessee, we're talking about California. I just wanted to note that Mike Bukaris had shared with us that study from CUNY, where I'll just read: approximately 2/3 of the faculty in natural sciences and half of faculty in humanities observed their students as having weaker reading, writing, and study skills than they had 5 years ago because of similar reforms. So we're seeing both the sort of political pressure to implement the sort of nationwide, right? And the same sorts of outcomes. So yeah, again, thank you all.
Good. And if you want to stay in and watch the rest of our meeting, you're free to do so. But I imagine a lot of you have other things that you have to do as well this afternoon. So thank you again.
Fascinating stuff.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, and feel free to contact us for any follow-up.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to our agenda. I'll go rapidly through some of the things that I want to present. The first thing is changes to membership and leadership of the Board of Regents. This is actually, I think, possibly significant. We have had 5 new members of the board within the last 6 months, or to at most a year, including Joanne Ryan, who has become chair of the board, as Matt Fleury has completed his second term. As well, Jim McCarthy, whose background is at the Baruch College of CUNY. Ira Bloom, who has become the chair of the ASA committee, whose background is at Lehman College at CUNY. So that's interesting that two of the appointments are Connecticut residents who nonetheless basically have their teaching and administrative experience at CUNY in New York City. And Richard Porth, who's been on the board for a few months now, who has a background in various government and nonprofit. So that's 5 of 10 members of the board who are new within the last period of time. We'll try and meet with these people. I can say, just from a personal point of view, that I welcome the appointment of Joanne Ryan as chair of the board. I've worked with her before in other circumstances here in the northwest of Connecticut. She is a fair-minded person and someone who likes to get information. So we'll see how things work out. There are certainly changes to procedure that we've asked for at the board. We want to have a regular report from the FAC to the board. We have other measures that we have proposed in the past, and I will bring these up again. The other changes, which you of course are aware of, is John Meduco as the CSCC president, Hitesh Kataria as the provost for CSCU, and also Paul Barron, who has become the interim president at Western. He has a background in the South Dakota Board of Regents and administrative experience at the University of Arkansas and Oklahoma State. So far as I know, no experience whatever in Connecticut, although I guess he's getting it now. So that was the point I wanted to make about the Board of Regents, and we'll come back to that as we continue our discussion with them as to the relationship between the Faculty Advisory Committee and the board. And I'll come back and we'll have a few things to say, and I know Lois will have some things to say when it comes to the strategic plan for the community colleges and claims that are being made about the FAC. The second item was the Finance Committee report. Just one item, but I will be sending this out really for the August meeting. I've always been curious because I read the spreadsheets, and I think the point that was just made is how the spreadsheet is constructed is really what is telling here. And I've always been interested that the Board of Regents is always listed, including in the governor's board budget, as a PS around $450,000 and another fringe of about $350,000, so about $800,000. However, as some of you may have noticed, or many of you may have noticed, pretty well every week, CSU sends out a weekly job announcements, right? And I've now almost completed my study of it, which is a really arcane interest, I have to say. But nonetheless, people are being recruited, and these are job postings. Now, I don't know how many of these positions have been filled, but I can certainly tell you something about the postings. And they're posted in 3 different ways. Some of them are postings where the application is to the Board of Regents, and that includes for Charter Oak. Some of them are for the CSCC, and some of them are for the individual community colleges. And the point that I just want to make here, and I'm going to be asking for further clarification, I did at the last meeting of the board, but it wasn't very clear. In fact, the number of job openings which are specified under Board of Regents is 35. You obviously cannot pay 35 high-level administrators. Most of these are management confidential or high-level listings out of $800,000. So the explanation which I got from Ben Barnes as well, those salaries are apportioned to the universities and to the community colleges. But I mean, this is obviously something that we want to look into a bit more, because it's clear that there's a kind of misrepresentation here as to what are the administrative costs of the system, right? And I can add further that I've looked at the number of people being hired under CSCC, and that is over 100 job positions. And then the number of positions which have been made available at the level of the community colleges, individual community colleges, are about 400. So that's over 600 job postings since March of 2021. That's a large number of positions, to say the least. Now, many of those may be filled by people who are already in the system. People may be moving from one classification to another or trying to re-get their own job as it's been reclassified. All that I think needs to be looked into, and I'll have a further report on that for the August meeting. But certainly that item of the Board of Regents cost, that appears in the governor's budget and in the legislature's budget. So that is something that I think we want especially a clarification for. The third part that I had was any information we had on the situation at Western Connecticut State University. But I don't know if we have anybody here from Western today, do we? If not, we'll put that on to the meeting in August. But that was, as you know, there was a vote of non-confidence in the president. There was a report, a financial report, which was done by the system office through an external group, NECHME, and a replacement of the president with an interim president. So those are the items that I had. Kalina, do you want to talk about academic and student affairs?
Sure, and we actually have not met since our last meeting. I think we all know that all of the curriculum for the for CSCC is now complete, and I suppose next semester the shared governance bodies will begin coming into existence. So that has always been a bit of an issue for us. I think you've already mentioned our new board chair, etc. So that said, I just bring a couple things to your attention. You know, in addition to what you're pointing out, David, about, you know, the real costs of this consolidation, etc., or the administrative costs of the new college, whatever you want to call it. Stephen Adair also presented an estimate sort of modeled on the way that Western's financial situation was calculated to the board at the last meeting, and that can be found right online, you know, in the board minutes. And of course, it's a very large number. I believe the projected estimate at the time of the consolidation was it was under $2 million. So, you know, that speaks, I think, David, to the fact that, you know, this is all coming out of block grants and we don't really actually know how much, right? And then the other thing that there was a lot of commentary from faculty from both community college and university faculty was the I Teach mandate that is still being applied to community college faculty. And I think for our purposes, the most sort of striking issue with that is that though community college faculty are required to take this, you know, training for online instruction, as it seems a condition of employment, university faculty are not so required. So it's just you know, there's an inequity there. So there was a lot of written commentary on that that's also attached to the minutes. I think that's really it, because you've covered the other stuff, David. That's it for me.
Okay. The other item which we've put under community college is the draft strategic plan. Right, Lois, you're the one who's I think sent it around. I never
No,
received it.
I didn't send it around. I sent it to you guys.
Okay. Well, I sent it around then.
You sent it around with my comments.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. But I'm going to put it online here if I can share properly. This is for the academic years 2023 to 2025, and as a follow-up, we had Terry Brown, the CEO from Gateway, I hope I got his name correct, who did a presentation to us at his request, and I think we said at that point that we were not impressed with the strategic plan, that in fact it didn't mention faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy, was not clear on structures of shared governance, and was merely a bunch of 11 tiles, I think, at that point in a PowerPoint presentation. Yet what we find here highlighted, and I guess I'll assume responsibility for the highlighting, is we want to express our deep appreciation to the Faculty Advisory Council, to the Board of Regents, who provided honest and earnest feedback during the development of the plan. Each time we engaged the FAC, we got useful feedback from them, and the council subsequently incorporated their comments into our planning work. Now, when I saw this, I had two thoughts. One, either there is some other group called the Faculty Advisory Council, which they have created themselves because they're not happy with the Faculty Advisory Committee and our criticisms, or else, secondly, they know so little about us that they don't even get our names straight. And moreover, what they claim about the Faculty Advisory Committee is quite simply a confabulation. Otherwise put, it's false. We did not, and I don't see any useful feedback which they have incorporated. So I think that's a major point which we need to bring to the attention of the board. And to this should be added that when they divide, and I've been involved in strategic planning at the university going back to the later 1990s. And of course, strategic plans are usually wishful thinking. Very often it's everybody gets to put in their favorite little thing, and then you have 415 items, and then who knows what the priorities are. But here, they'd have sort of boiled it down to three major goals. And what is striking there is the absence of faculty. And I think that's the second point that we need to bring about. The only time the faculty is mentioned, in fact, is on page 6. If I can find it here and show you. I should have highlighted it. The central aim of CT State is to address systemic inequalities, both between students, faculty, and staff of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and between institutions. And again, faculty is mentioned here only within the context of the equity issue, but not with respect to curriculum and pedagogy. And of course, that's a major criticism which we have of the whole Student First project, is that it does not recognize faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy. It skates over, if it mentions at all, shared governance, and really is a kind of a faculty last program, not a students first program. So I think that there are things that we need to bring to the attention of the board at its next meeting. And again, references to faculty here, always in the context of the equity issue, but not in terms of curriculum and pedagogy. So I don't know, Kalina, did you want to add something to that? And Lois as well?
Yeah, I'm just, I guess, unclear because I was looking at the document and it does say for review and feedback. So my thought was we can get back to the chairs of this committee, let them know that we'd like them to modify, that statement about the FAC's contribution. And I think that's right. We received the information, and in conversation, the thing that came up was the addition of faculty, which has not really been addressed. The only thing is that I'm not clear on, I'm looking at the email that went out to Connecticut State. I think. Yes, so it is a draft plan. So I guess there is still the opportunity to ask for modifications, and we can do that. Because it will not get to the board yet.
Yeah, it is a rather slim document. Let's put it that way. When their whole notion of their vision is that the Canadian state colleges and universities will continually increase the number of students completing personally and professionally rewarding academic programs. Again, that's a fairly limited notion, a very limited vision.
Yeah.
Etc. And it goes throughout the whole rest of the document.
Mm-hmm. I think what happened when it was brought to the committee was that we didn't really participate in offering substantive feedback, right? So I guess we could correct the record about our participation.
Yes, we can correct the record about our participation and indicate that it doesn't deal with the essential questions of interest to faculty and to staff, which is faculty control of curriculum and pedagogy and shared governance. So, I mean, it's unsatisfactory as it stands. I don't know that this can actually be improved. It will have to be rewritten entirely in some sensible
I have
manner.
a question. Of the people that are on this strategic planning committee or council, how many of them are faculty?
That I don't know.
I see Michael Rook there, whom I know, but he's not faculty.
No, where was that? Which page is that on?
I think it's what, page 2.
I'm sorry.
Second page.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's another
right there.
Yeah, that's another way of sort of padding the list of names, because precisely we don't know who's faculty, we don't know who's staff, we don't know what.
I recognize several. Yeah, I recognize several of these people, but none of them are faculty. I mean, I know Vincent Tong, I know Ching Mack, Michael Rook, but
David
I
Levinson is
can't
listed.
recognize anybody.
David Levinson is listed, and he's no longer involved.
Yeah, I know, but there's no. I can't. Does anybody recognize anybody that's faculty here? Never mind.
I've seen maybe one or two names who were originally faculty but are currently located at the system office in interim positions, but I haven't found anyone who isn't.
So they're administrators in waiting, right?
So I think we can. I'm going to stop the sharing so I can see if there's anybody who has a hand up. But we can leave it. We'll bring this up with the chair of the board and with the next board meeting, our dissatisfaction with this draft strategic plan. The other issue was weekly job postings. I already talked about that. So we're approaching the end, although we do have 2 more items. One is any further information about the Faculty Advisory Committee conference for the fall. Have we made any further progress on this? Or shall we leave it again to the meeting in August? I mean, it is an occasion when we could put forward, whatever alternative, especially community college faculty, want to the plan for the consolidated community college. And there are at least 2 issues that seem to me important. One is to maintain the accreditation of the community colleges. It isn't clear to me that NESHI's accrediting the Connecticut State Community College necessarily means eliminating the accreditation of the 12 community colleges. And we should at least be asking that question. It may well be that it's up to the system office and to the executive of the CSCU to remit those accreditations. But I'm not sure that that automatically follows from the accreditation of the CSCC, which could have on a certain model of a system of systems, certain centralized functions. But not, to the exclusion or to the disaccreditation of the member community colleges. Lois, I don't know if you have a point on that.
I'm sorry, David, what?
Oh, I thought you had your hand up. I'm sorry. That's okay. The other thing is the question of the structure, the elimination of departments, and in particular department chairs at the level of the colleges. So that may be something that we wish to bring forward at the conference and look at, alternative models for taking into account what is actually happening, and moreover, what we want to see. But that's just my idea. That said, the last item of business is the resolution that I sent around. Let me see if I can get that on screen. on I think it's screen 2. Proposed resolution on COVID-19 policy. Again, I find myself in a strange position. Colleen and I attend all the meetings of the board and of the various committees of which we're on, and nobody has mentioned any planning, either to review and revise policy or to develop new policy with respect to COVID-19 for fall 2022. Yet we know that the virus has now taken the Omicron form. There's the BA.5 variant of that, which appears to be more easily spread, apparently less virulent, but it may also circumvent much of the vaccines that have been already administered. And so it's back to the situation we were in April of 2021, when no planning had been undertaken for the fall 2021 school year, and it was the Faculty Advisory Committee's resolution which forced the Board of Regents to get the system office going and to come up with at least a resolution on, in that case, mandated vaccines. So this is a proposal. I know there's been a couple of comments on it. It's important for us to have a resolution because otherwise the Board of Regents won't consider allowing us to make a report. So the whereases, I think, are unproblematic. The be it resolved is really in 4 parts, that we ask them to revise, review, and update the CSA policy on COVID-19 for fall 2022. And that is pretty general, although, of course, I think one of the big issues will be booster shots. And I do say here, either as required or recommended. So that leaves open whatever possibility. If the virus continues at a sublethal level, but that's something that could be recommended. We don't know what's going to be happening, although we have some premonitions in terms of the fall. It could be worse, in which case there could be some requirements. Secondly, that we recommend that we draw the lessons learned from the last 2 years of the pandemic. And that means that we want to talk about how effective were the measures taken. And we want to draw conclusions for possible future health emergencies. Those people who remember the COVID epidemic that occurred in 2003, 2004, know that those countries or institutions which drew some lessons from what was a much weaker COVID event were able to more rapidly develop positive procedures to deal with this one. And those who didn't had to start from scratch. And the third thing we want is, or that is recommended here, is to get the relevant data for vaccination rates, exemptions, both medical and non-medical, rates of infection by sector and institution, and the extent of remote teaching and work. And I'll give you just one example of this, if I can find it here. And that is at my university. Yes, I've got it. We asked on a number of occasions, you may recall, one of the big bones of contention was the non-medical exemptions, where we had been unhappy with the grant all non-medical exemptions on demand. And I had asked on a number of occasions, both to the system office and also at my own university, what are the numbers? How many people have been vaccinated? How many people have not been vaccinated? What is the rate of non-medical vaccinations and so forth? And finally, I was never given that information. I was told that was none of my business, that either the individual I had contacted, who was a senior administrator, this was above their pay scale, or that information was relevant to the system office and was being looked after there. But I'll give you just one example from my university. The Recorder, which is the student newspaper, and I'm not sure if you can see this now, perhaps you can't, but I'll just read it to you. They finally did a freedom of information to require the university to give them that data. Now, at my university, I thought that the measures taken were quite effective, and that a serious and earnest effort had been made to protect students, faculty, and staff. But when we look at this, The number of faculty receiving a medical exemption was 6. Non-medical was 49. The number of students receiving a medical exemption was 30. Non-medical was 858. That meant that 10% of the students were not vaccinated with no medical reason. So that's significant, and I think we need to have the numbers for other areas as well. So that is the third point in the resolution. And the final point is the question that it's just not information that should be made available, but some education undertaken so that students, faculty, and staff better understand what is the nature of this virus and of the vaccines. Otherwise, people have information, but there's plenty of counter information. They need to also have some education. So that's the proposal for a resolution. And I try to make it as broad and as flexible as possible. So this is not mandating anything. It's not saying that we're going to mandate vaccines or boosters, but that these are issues that should be brought forward. If you notice one thing, the retirement rates, and I have the figures here. If we look at for the entire system, there were a total of 727 retirements in fiscal year for this ending the last term, right? And that was 14% of faculty and staff. That's a huge number. 5% of faculty retired, but 16% of staff retired. And that may or may not be related to the way in which they were required to come in and not work remotely during the pandemic. But certainly we see much higher rates of faculty retirement, nearly 20%, 30% increase, and for staff, an even larger increase. So I sent along a copy of this to everybody. I don't know if this is something we would like to move as a resolution. I would hope that we could, because that's the only way that we can deal with the Board of Regents.
You're waiting for a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so moved. I mean, the point is that, you know, they're basically derelict in their duties. They should be re-examining the policy, you know. And I understand why they're afraid to, because they're afraid to whatever they do, they could be liable for something. But that means that, hey, you know, you don't take the job if you don't want the responsibility.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I have a question, David.
Yeah.
I can't read what you've got up there. Do you still have that piece about it being less virulent?
Yeah, that's, you hear what, sorry. And you wanted to move that off. That's right?
I do have a concern with that because I can see them jumping all over that saying, oh, look, this is, you know, this is going to be less of a problem. We really don't have to do much of anything.
Well, but it is a question of fact. Okay, so if
No, it
they,
isn't.
I mean,
No, everything I'm reading saying they're still doing research on that.
Yeah,
I know it's a question of fact. I didn't say it's a fact. I just said it's a question of fact. The point is that what we're asking them to do is to go out there and actually look at the facts and figure it out and make a decision. Okay, one way or the other, decide what to do based on whatever the facts of today are. Okay, so I don't think we're saying that this variant or whatever the next variant is going to be less virulent.
Yeah, I'll add the word,
because that's not, you know.
I'll add the word possibly.
Understood, but I just think that putting that in there gives them an opportunity. It's opening a door for them.
Do you have a proposal to modify it?
Take it out completely is my feel.
That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. The whereas
fine.
are
Not that, well, I don't know what the whole thing, but it was just take out the fact that it's less variant. There was, what is that whereas? I can't see
yeah,
that.
it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll make it bigger. Hang on a second.
Just read it, that's all.
Yeah, it's here. Whereas the Omicron BA.5 variant, now dominant, is more easily communicated, though, and I've added possibly less virulent.
Yeah, and I would just take out, it is more easily communicated, that's a fact.
All right.
Well, okay. I don't think we should be, asserting facts like that one way or the other. I mean, either well, whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll take it out. I mean, that's fine. I don't think it makes a difference because
whole thing
it's not
out.
relevant to the be it resolved part.
Yeah, the point is that they it's been a while. Things have changed, and they ought to be looking at it and updating whatever the system is. Basically, we're asking them to do their job.
Right. And the purpose is to initiate a conversation as the situation evolves. So who knows where we'll be by then.
Okay, is there a seconder for this?
I'll second.
Okay, Lois. Further discussion?
So we're taking that whole whereas out, right?
No, I'll just take and less virulent. I've taken that part out. So whereas the Omicron BA.5.
Yeah, but if you take that out, okay, but you see, then the implication is that the situation is more dire than it was before. Yes. Okay, and that's not necessarily true either. Well, I would suggest take the whole thing out.
Okay.
But it's a fact that it is more. It's more easily communicable.
And it's also a fact it's less virulent. Okay, well, so the point is, if you're going to take one out, take the other out.
That isn't a fact.
Well, folks, here's my solution. Add the word possibly less virulent.
Fine, whatever.
Okay.
That's fine with me too.
Good. Thanks. Okay, any further discussion? I can't see if there's a hand raised.
Hi, David. This is Carmen. I just want to mention that I still have a problem with just saying that FAC is saying that you're possibly requiring. I mean, you yourself just said that the latest strain seems to be evading the vaccines. So why would we ask for it to be required? And I just feel like that's not something the FAC should be asking for at this point.
Yeah, we're not asking for it. I simply put that in because, it may be that the booster, that they develop a new booster, which would be more effective against Omicron and this more recent one. The word here, where is it? I know that you sent an email on this one. To involve a policy of booster shots either as required or as recommended. Do you have a modification to that terminology that you want to put forward?
Maybe just using a recommended, and that's and just not putting required in there.
Yeah.
Can you see that? So the proposal here would be to just remove the booster shots. Policy on booster shots. I don't even put recommended. Just take the whole thing out.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Just take the whole thing out.
Policy on booster shots. That's all.
Yeah, okay. What is it? Yeah.
And that's not shots.
Isn't shots misspelled?
Yes, I just changed.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Further discussion?
Could you please read that change, David? I can't see it.
Yeah, one that the FAC recommends that the BOR revise, review, and update the CSU policy on COVID-19 for fall 2022 to include a policy on booster shots, along with funding for on-campus booster vaccinations.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, then all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Abstentions?
Abstention, Diane.
Patrice is abstaining.
Okay. Please indicate there are 2 abstentions. All right, that's approved. That takes us now to other business. I don't know if there are other matters that need to be brought up at this point. The iTeams issue was brought up before, or the iTeach issue. So that's something we need to look into further as well. If not,
I just had a quick question for the planning meeting. I can't remember. I think my understanding was that there was going to be no funding available for that, if I'm correct, and that the meeting, if it takes place in the fall, would just be completely online. Is that correct?
I think you're correct.
Okay.
But we haven't determined, the whole question of when do we meet in person is an issue we haven't actually looked at, which we should look at the August meeting. I mean, personally, I'm, going more places and doing more things, although sometimes I wear a mask if I go into a store that I'm not familiar with. But we should be thinking about when do we meet in person, and one of the possibilities is hybrid meetings. And I've done that with an academic association of which I'm responsible, and actually it worked quite well. We had about half and half.
Okay.
Person and online. So I think that's something we need to talk about at the next meeting, at the August meeting. But I would suggest that we should consider meeting ourselves in person with a hybrid component and doing the same for the proposed conference.
Okay. Thanks. I agree.
Same here.
Carmen, your hand is still up, but it may have been just for the previous.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing further, then we've arrived at that time of the meeting to adjourn. Do I have a motion
to adjourn?
Andre? I'm not even sure we need a second for that.
No, but there's no vote.
And we have again we have again a meeting in August. So despite the fact that the board is meeting during the summer, we think it's sufficiently important to continue to do so. And I do appreciate everybody who was able to come today. That was really a good discussion about the California. And I think, we're much better prepared to deal with the argument that has been made so far, which is, oh, they're doing it in some other state and look how successful it is. Right? Which has been to a large extent what has been underlying the ACME, the CSS 101, the various other measures which have been taken without our.
By the way, I just started reading the strategic plan. There's a lot of good stuff in there, like integrity and things, Wonderful language.
Yeah, strategic plans are full of good wishes.
We can use some of that to argue against some of the crap they're doing.
That said, those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Right. Those who wish to stay on forever, say nay. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now. We're adjourned until August. Thank you very much.
Take care.